In about an hour from now, President Biden will arrive in Saudi Arabia for his highly anticipated meetings with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and his father, King Salman. The president boarded Air Force One a little earlier. He's the first president to travel directly between Israel and Saudi Arabia. The flight comes as Riyadh opens its airspace to all flights, including those from Israel.
The U.S. has accused the Crown Prince in a declassified CIA report of greenlighting the murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. During this visit, President Biden is hoping to secure a commitment from Saudi leaders to produce more oil, which may help drive down gas prices here at home. Ed O'Keefe reports from Jeddah.
The reason I'm going to Saudi Arabia, though, is much broader, is to promote U.S. interest.
President Biden says talking to Saudi Arabia is a must.
I think we have an opportunity to reassert what I think we've made a mistake of walking away from, our influence in the Middle East.
That's despite previous campaign promises to isolate the Saudis for ordering the 2018 murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
We were going to, in fact, make them pay the price and make them, in fact, the pariah that they are. There's very little social redeeming value in the present government in Saudi Arabia.
The president began Friday by meeting with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas.
2 states for 2 peoples, both of whom have deep and ancient roots in this land.
In East Jerusalem, he announced $100 million in U.S. aid for Palestinian hospitals.
Palestinians and Israelis deserve equal measure of freedom, security, prosperity, and dignity. And access to health care when you need it is essential.
But in nearby Ramallah, Mustafa Barghouti, a longtime Palestinian political leader, says he regrets Mr. Biden didn't do more during this trip to help Israel and the Palestinians implement the so-called two-state solution.
Giving the money to the hospitals is good, but it doesn't solve the whole problem. And the whole problem is really these restrictions by occupation.
So freedom of movement would be more valuable than money?
Freedom of movement is definitely more valued than money. But our freedom and dignity is even more valuable.
Now, officially, the president is here to drop in on a previously scheduled regional conference of Arab nations. On Saturday, he's going to hold one-on-one meetings with the leaders of Egypt, Iraq, and the United Arab Emirates, while also seeing several others. But of course, it's what's going to transpire here tonight when the president meets with the Saudi king and his son, the controversial crown prince, that's sure to garner the most attention back in the United States and around the world. Anne-Marie and Vlad?
All right, Ed, thank you very much, my friend. Let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Bo Erickson. He's also joining us from Jeddah. So, Bo, in the meeting today with the Crown Prince and his father, the King, will the murder of Jamal Khashoggi come up? And how is the White House getting around the president's statement 2 years ago when he pledged, when he was running for the presidency and asking people to vote for him, he pledged to make Saudi Arabia a, quote, pariah over the killing of Jamal Khashoggi? And I have a follow-up.
So, Vlad, that was actually 968 days ago that I did the math on that he said he was going to make the Saudi Arabia a pariah state. But he didn't just say that on that debate stage. He also said that he would punish Saudi leaders, and he also said that there'd be no new weapon sales if he became president. Now that he is President Joe Biden, he seems to be trying to break the ice today with Saudi leaders and try to reset the relationship after all those things he said about those leaders, and they are still in power today. He was asked yesterday if he is going to bring up Jamal Khashoggi when he meets with Crown Prince MBS, and President Biden really didn't answer that question, but he did say he is going to talk to the Saudi leaders about human rights. Something to remember about these meetings is that everything when two leaders meet each other is very heavily choreographed. So whatever happens, whether Mr. Biden and the Saudi Crown Prince, whether they shake hands or not, that will be what was intended to happen. So we will find out in just a few quick hours what is going to happen.
So, Bo, my quick follow-up then is, if the president does not bring up the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, how will they answer members of the press? How will they answer you and the rest of the White House press corps and the international community when that is the question that people are going to ask? Because I'm sure strategically, as far as our energy concerns are, people worry and care about that. But this is going to be the thing that everybody's going to be talking about. How is the White House prepared to respond?
There are concerns, Vlad, from human rights experts that President Biden, by already meeting with these Saudi leaders, is already giving too much. They also question that he has not specifically said what he's going to make an ask of for human rights. So if he doesn't bring up Khashoggi, if he doesn't specifically ask for human rights, these human rights experts back in Washington fear that the Saudi leadership are going to have the upper hand over President Biden.
So I also have a two-part question.
Yes, we're like you guys in the White House press corps when you ask 2- and 3-part questions to the president.
We know that there are other topics that are going to be discussed. Some will have to do with oil production and some other things. And so my part A is what else will they be discussing? Part B is, and I'm stealing this, in fact, from another journalist that I heard ask this question, will the president be telling or asking? In other words, in what sort of negotiating or power position is the president in at this point?
I think the president will be discussing elements with the Saudi leaders. The White House was very clear not to put too much weight on everything that was going to be discussed here, because I think there is some fear that they are not going to come back with a big policy change or even a really large announcement. So they don't want it to be seen as a loss for the president going into these meetings with the Saudi leaders. The other things that are going to be discussed in the meeting, though, according to a senior administration official, is definitely oil. There is talk that the U.S. is going to ask Saudi to pump more oil to try to bring down U.S. gas prices. Other elements that are going to be discussed is Yemen. The White House is really trying to lean in and saying they are helping to try to strengthen the ceasefire in that Yemen conflict with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has been in conflict with Iran-backed rebels for the past few years. There's currently a ceasefire there, so they're trying to continue that. And one other thing that they're going to talk about is kind of this regional integration that we heard a lot about when the president was in Israel, is flying right now. And that flight is actually the point I want to make, is because they are trying to show that the flight directly from Israel to Saudi Arabia is something very tangible that they are getting out of this trip. Saudi Arabia today announced that they are opening airspace to Israeli commercial flights so they can fly directly from Israel to Saudi Arabia. That has never happened before.
Well, thank you very much.